Hey folks, in preparation for my upcoming Kafka Summit talk, I prepared a very simple technical example to basically connect Zeebe, the workflow engine within Camunda Cloud, the BPMN workflow engine in Camunda Cloud, with a Kafka topic running in Confluent Cloud. So I have basically both cloud services to have a managed workflow engine, a managed event bus. And then I did a small Java Spring Boot application to glue both together. I could have used a Kafka Connect. That's a different story. That's also there, which can basically also do the same thing, right? But I wanted to do it in code and want to quickly show you that because it's pretty straightforward actually. So I'm using Java and Spring Boot here. And one thing I can do as soon as I have the right dependencies, so both frameworks have the appropriate Spring Boot integration. So if I have these here, one thing I can do is I can also define the topic I want to use in Kafka here, which is the example topic which will be created when the application starts up. And I can define a BPMN process model, which I opened up in the modeler here, which again also will be deployed onto the workflow engine when the application starts up, because that's what I basically defined here. Okay, deploy this process model during startup. So that's all I need in order to get started. Then I did create a Confluent Cloud account. Here I created an API key in order to be able to access it. And I did the same thing here for Camunda Cloud. I created a workflow engine cluster and I created an API key here. So what that allows me is to add all these right properties like cluster ID and the credentials for Camunda Cloud here, as well as the cluster ID for Kafka and the credentials here as well, right? So that's more or less it. That allows me to connect to both worlds. Of course, you could override these properties by environment variables you set. So this makes it very easy. Configurable if you then run production code in whatever, Kubernetes, Docker, whatever you want to do. Right, and then what I do is the following. Right, I want to create a so-called worker. So whenever a new process instance arrives in that service task, it should write a new record to Kafka. So let's look at that code. It's a so-called worker. So we connect to the workflow engine here, right? That's send record, that's a connection. That means that worker subscribes to the workflow engine in the cloud saying, hey, I can do send record. And what does that mean? Okay, I create a new correlation ID, a UUID, to send the record to Kafka. I'm using the Kafka template from Spring here, basically just providing the topic name and a very simple JSON content which contains the just created correlation ID. I'm using reactive programming, so whenever that works, I'm logging. If there's a problem, I'm also logging that. That's probably not the best approach here, but anyhow. And whenever I've done with that, I complete the job. So basically this service task in BPMN, let the workflow engine know, and also hand over that correlation ID to the workflow engine. So that's stored in the variables of the process instance. And again, I use reactive programming, so if there's something wrong, I throw an exception. And that's more or less it. Okay, this will send a record to Kafka and the process instance will move on. Then I'm arriving in the wait task, so I'm waiting for the record on the same topic, so it's kind of, it plays with itself. It's lovely to show technology, not very useful in real life probably, but I'm waiting for a message. I call the message Kafka record received, and this is interesting. Now I'm correlating So the incoming message must find the right process instance. And I'm looking for process instances with a variable into the variable correlation ID and Kafka record, and that's exactly the variable I have written here, right? So I know this variable contains the correlation ID I also have in the record. Okay, and then I write a Kafka listener here, where I listen to that topic, right? And whenever I get a record there, I process it, and I basically what I do, I read it as a JSON, and then I look into the JSON JSON if I have the field correlation ID, read it as text, and now I call the Workflow Engine API to hand over that. It's also called message in the Zeebe or in BPMN speak. So I'm publishing the message to the Workflow Engine with that name. So this is exactly that connection with that name, with the correlation ID I just got from the record, and that's it. Okay, that's all I need. That's all the code. If I run this, what it will do during startup, it will auto-create the topic. So if we go back to Camunda Cloud and Confluent Cloud. So we got the example topic that was just created. So if I look into the topic, I can basically watch for new records in my topic. Okay, so this is here. And in Camunda Cloud, I can look into the Workflow Engine and see that I have that simple Kafka demo process deployed. Okay, I played around with that already a little bit. But I see that there is no running instance at the moment. What I want to do is I want to open this in the background so we see some logging. I use that modeler to kick off a new process instance. There are multiple ways to do that. You could use command line, but it's pretty convenient for me at the moment. What you can see is that some things were happening here. So it produced a record. Okay, that was the worker. So that was the thing connected to the service task, and then the listener already kicked in a couple of milliseconds later. So that was basically the round trip via Confluent Cloud to process that and correlate it to the right waiting process instance. So what we see, if I make that smaller, what we can see in Confluent Cloud and Kafka is that we saw that message. And if I refresh on the Zeebe side here, we see that we basically finished another process instance. So the latest one here, right? I can do that again. So if I have to do it again, it started, I see the message, and if I refresh here, hang on. We saw some problem here. No, that should work actually. Okay. Then I also see it here. This one. If you look into the process instance, by the way, you're seeing the correlation ID we just used. You can see all data, like, okay, when did I go into that? When I go into that? When did I finish? And so on and so forth. So you see all the audit data. You see a lot of stuff around. What you can also see, by the way, and even if we're using a couple of cloud services here, it's not really slow. So it's pretty good actually in terms of latency for all the components, and probably that goes too deep for that quick overview I wanted to give today. But and this is not related to throughput at all. So if you have a high load system, you can still run these things. Last remark here, it's not totally unrealistic to have these glue code running somewhere else. So really leveraging managed service on Confluent Cloud and Camunda Cloud. You can select for Confluent Cloud, you can select the cloud provider. So I run on Google Cloud and the region. So I run on U West 1, I think here. For Camunda Cloud, you cannot yet do that. So you always run in Google Cloud on exactly that region. But as soon as you can select it here, or if you're flexible here, you can even put it in the same region in Google Cloud. So latency are pretty slow. And then you could deploy this little clue code here, probably even in your own Google Cloud environment. So you have everything together quite nicely. And more or less the same thing also works with Kafka Connect. Not going into these details today, but just to show you that Kafka Connect also can do that. I have a Docker Compose file proving that. So there you use Kafka Connect with that Kafka Connect Zeebe component, and there it's the same thing. You can basically connect to Confluent Cloud on the one end, and then you can connect to Camunda Cloud on the other end, right? Okay, that's all I have. Don't want to make it any longer. Thanks for watching. See you around.